There are truths too vast for language and teachings too luminous for parchment. They are not written with ink, but etched into the marrow of reality itself, into the trembling silence between stars, and the subtle resonance behind every human heartbeat. When we approach the mystery of Jesus, not as a figure confined to religious iconography, but as a cosmic emissary embedded within the hologram of time, something shifts. His parables start to feel less like moral tales and more like activation codes. His presence, wounded yet radiant, becomes an archetypal whisper echoing from another realm. And when that echo is filtered through the prism of the emerald tablets, those ancient emerald green slivers of esoteric knowledge, a deeper geometry of truth begins to emerge, one that cuts through dogma and opens a portal into the structure of the soul. The emerald tablets, attributed to Thoth the Atlantean, scribe of the gods, architect of balance, voice of eternal wisdom, are themselves a relic from beyond linear history. They speak not only in words but in frequencies, layering metaphor upon metaphor to encode universal principles of transformation. And when those principles are placed beside the teachings of Jesus, not in rivalry but in resonance, a bridge unfolds. A sacred symmetry. It is as though two celestial tones, long separated by cultural veils, begin to harmonize, forming chords of revelation that pierce the veil of ordinary perception. This exploration is not for the purpose of syncretism, nor a quest to reduce mystery into a digestible schema. Rather, it is an invitation to look again, to gaze into the face of Jesus, not merely as a man from Galilee, but as a luminous note of divine intelligence, a soul who came bearing blueprints, and to read the emerald tablets not just as mystical poetry from antiquity, but as reflections from a timeless intelligence encoded with universal law. Together, they reveal a deeper architecture, a hidden scaffold behind the physical and spiritual evolution of humanity. To understand Jesus through this lens is to step outside of linear theology and step into a spiraling cosmology. Consider how he spoke in parables, stories nested within stories, where each symbol opened not just meaning, but experience. The kingdom of God was never simply a destination, but a vibratory state. The Father was not an old man in the clouds, but the infinite pattern, the living oneness pulsing behind all form. The act of resurrection was not a divine trick or a singular miracle, but a profound demonstration of the power latent within every soul to overcome the illusions of death through alignment with the eternal. These were not mere doctrines to be believed. They were instructions, encoded metaphors, thresholds waiting to be crossed. The emerald tablets echo similar truths, as above, so below. Man is in the process of becoming that which he is. These are not merely riddles, they are keys, compressed fractals of knowledge that unlock chambers within the self. The tablets speak of light and shadow, of energy bodies and soul ascension, of time as illusion and thought as creative force. They do not contradict Jesus, they complete him, or rather, they reveal how his message was never meant to be confined to any one tradition, but belonged to a deeper stream of spiritual gnosis flowing through the heart of all wisdom paths. It is in this confluence that something extraordinary arises. We begin to see that Jesus did not come to start a religion, but to illuminate a path of inner alchemy. He came to show that the temple is not built with stone, but with the sacred geometry of awakened consciousness. That the real exodus is not from Egypt, but from illusion. That crucifixion is not the end, but a symbol of egoic death, leading to the resurrection of the true self. These teachings, seen through the lens of the emerald tablets, vibrate with new life. They cease to be static truths and become dynamic invitations. Imagine then that the Sermon on the Mount was a frequency transmission, that every beatitude was not just a blessing, but a code activating forgotten light within the listener. Imagine that when Jesus walked on water, it was not to defy physics, but to illustrate transcendence, the principle that consciousness, when harmonized with the divine, floats above the turbulence of matter. Now layer this with Thoth's reminder that man is a flame bound to a mountain, and the two voices begin to blend, the Christic flame and the Atlantean mountain, fire and form, spirit and structure. Together, they form a roadmap. And so we begin, not with certainty, but with curiosity, not with dogma, but with a lantern of inquiry held up to the caverns of hidden knowledge. This journey is not about reconciling two traditions for academic pleasure. It is about remembering what you already carry in your DNA. It is about listening with the inner ear, the ancient ear that remembers the temple schools, the desert initiations, the crystalline halls of Atlantis, and the whisper of the Christ light within your chest. Let us walk through this mirror together. Let us peer into the overlapping spheres of these two teachings and see not division, but sacred convergence. In that space between Thoth's emerald script and Jesus' spoken parables lies a third thing, a luminous code that has been buried not in books but in the vault of your soul, waiting to be remembered. To grasp the marrow of these hidden teachings, one must first shed the husk of mere belief and allow the soul to become porous, receptive to that which cannot be measured, only felt. The language of both Jesus and the Emerald Tablets points not to external systems, but to internal revolutions. They beckon the seeker inward, not toward abstraction, but toward alignment with what is eternal. In the spiraling language of both masters, Thoth and the Christ, we find recurring themes: light as origin and destiny, illusion as veil and test, and the human soul as both prisoner and sovereign. They do not speak in linear terms, for truth rarely arrives in straight lines. It spirals, ascends, folds into itself like sacred geometry, alive with intelligence. One of the most fundamental threads in this tapestry is the concept of light. To Jesus, light was not metaphorical alone, it was ontological. "I am the light of the world," he declared, not out of ego, but as a statement of metaphysical fact. Light, in his vocabulary, was the primal essence, the divine frequency that both animates and guides. Likewise, the Emerald Tablets reverberate with this same luminous emphasis. Man is a flame, Thoth writes, bound by the flesh. Light is not something one seeks, it is what one is, beneath the veil of distortion. Both masters use light not to illuminate the world merely, but to point toward the origin of consciousness itself. Light is the blueprint of divinity, encoded within the human template, forgotten but not lost. Then comes the notion of illusion, the veil, the matrix, the great forgetting. Jesus spoke often of those who had eyes but could not see, ears but could not hear. This blindness, he warned, was not physical but spiritual, a hypnosis induced by attachment to form, fear, and social conditioning. Similarly, Thoth warns of the dweller in darkness, the force of sleep and stagnation that cloaks man in forgetfulness. In both teachings, illusion is not inherently evil, but a necessary obstacle, a kind of soul weight meant to forge discernment. The world, in this view, is not the enemy. It is the crucible. It is the mirage through which truth must walk barefoot and bruised until the seeker learns to see beyond it. But this is not a gospel of despair. It is one of divine potential. Both Jesus and the Emerald Tablets converge on the revelation that man is divine in essence. "The kingdom of God is within you," Jesus said, an astonishing declaration that flies in the face of externalized religion. The Emerald Tablets echo this. "Know ye not, O man, ye are all gods?" Here, the human being is not a sinner groveling before an angry Sky Father, but an infinite being caught in the dream of limitation. The soul, in both systems, is portrayed as a spark of the absolute, imprisoned in flesh but capable of awakening, if it dares to remember. Another current running through both traditions is the idea of initiation through death and rebirth. For Jesus, the cross was never about punishment. It was initiation, the archetype of the alchemist's fire. Death was not defeat, but a sacred passage, an unveiling of eternal form. Unless a grain of wheat falls to the earth and dies, it remains alone, he said, speaking not of horticulture, but transformation. Thoth mirrors this in his tales of entering the underworld to gain wisdom, of dying consciously to the lower self in order to be reborn in alignment with the higher. Here we see a profound parallel. Resurrection is not an anomaly, it is a principle. Death, when met consciously, becomes a doorway to the eternal self. Time, too, is treated not as a straight line, but as a spiral. Jesus often spoke of the end of the age rather than the end of the world, hinting at cosmic cycles. The Emerald Tablets are explicit about this. Time is illusory, a field within which consciousness plays but is not bound. Time is the movement in a pattern, Thoth writes, not in a straight line, but in a spiral around a central sun. This matches the hidden rhythm in Jesus' words, the sense that he was not merely preaching morality, but disclosing the mechanics of spiritual evolution, of soul timing, of incarnational thresholds. There is also the shared emphasis on sound and word as creative force. Jesus was called the Word made flesh, the Logos, divine vibration incarnate. He healed not through chemicals, but through intention, vibration, and command. The tablets echo this frequency. Thoth instructs the initiate to use sound to direct force, reminding us that the ancient mystery schools understood what modern science is only beginning to rediscover. Sound shapes matter. Frequency is architecture. In both teachings, the word is not just spoken, it is creative law. The Logos is the sacred algorithm behind existence, and hovering above all of this is the law of ascent. Jesus told his disciples they would do greater works than he, not because they were special, but because awakening is scalable. The Emerald Tablets describe the flame ascending through levels of initiation, through planes of awareness, until it merges once more with the Source. In both frameworks, salvation is not a reward, it is a remembering. Heaven is not a clouded destination after death. It is the interior state of divine alignment realized in the now. None of these teachings were meant to be exclusive. Jesus never preached a brand. Thoth never claimed cultural ownership of truth. Both of them speak to something deeper than dogma. They speak to the fractal truth embedded within all beings, the ancient knowing that the world is not as it seems, and that buried within the dust of the human experience is a divine seed aching to flower. To read Jesus through the eyes of Thoth is not to distort his message, but to widen it, to unshackle it from centuries of calcified interpretation, and to let it breathe once more in the infinite air of mystical understanding. Together, their voices call not for worship, but for awakening, not for separation, but for synthesis. The teachings are not far, they are already within you. You are not merely a student, you are the mystery learning to remember itself. Beneath every doctrine lies a parable. Beneath every parable, a symbol. And beneath every symbol, a portal. In the teachings of Jesus and the Emerald Tablets, this layering is not incidental. It is essential. These sacred narratives are not simply to be understood, they are to be entered, like doorways carved into the architecture of consciousness. They bypass the intellect and speak directly to the soul in symbols, the oldest language of the cosmos. Just as the stars are not merely lights, but ancient glyphs across the skin of heaven, so too are these stories not merely lessons, but holograms, multidimensional mirrors through which the initiate glimpses the infinite. Consider for a moment the image of Jesus in the desert for 40 days, a narrative soaked in mystery, stripped of distraction, immersed in stillness. He faces the adversary. But what is this adversary? Not a horned demon lurking in the dunes, but the fragmented echo of the ego itself, the whisperer of shortcuts, the architect of fear, the voice of illusion. Turn these stones into bread, the voice says, offering material power over spiritual truth. Throw yourself from the pinnacle, it tempts, inviting spectacle over silent knowing. Each temptation is not a test of obedience, but a symbolic gate. Will you define yourself by what you can manipulate or by what you are? Thoth, too, speaks of the dweller, the shadow that lies beneath the light, coiled like a serpent in the subconscious realms. It guards the thresholds of truth, not out of cruelty, but necessity. The dweller is not your enemy. It is your reflection. It is what must be integrated before ascension is possible. When Jesus and Thoth confront darkness, they are not teaching us to wage war against it, but to recognize its role in the alchemical process of becoming. The gold of consciousness is not mined in the daylight. It is forged in the depths. Take now the parable of the mustard seed. To the ordinary eye, it is merely a small tale about faith, but to the awakened ear, it is a cipher. The seed is the soul, infinitely compressed yet cosmically potent. The tree it becomes is not merely personal growth, it is the flowering of divine remembrance. The emerald tablets speak similarly. The flame within man is small, yet when kindled it becomes a beacon through which even the stars must bow. The seed, the flame. Two images, one truth. Power does not come from acquisition, but from alignment. Greatness is not added, it is uncovered. The cross itself, perhaps the most potent of Christian symbols, has long been misunderstood as a brutal ending, when in fact it is an esoteric map. Vertical meets horizontal, spirit meets matter. The crucifixion is not simply the suffering of one man, but the crucible of every soul trapped in duality. It is where the ego dies, so that the higher self may rise. Thoth, too, speaks of the crossing of the path, where opposites converge, where the initiate must balance the poles of light and dark, above and below. The cross is not a weapon of death. It is a sigil of transformation, the geometry of becoming. And what of water? Jesus walks upon it, turns it to wine, is baptized within it. It flows through his story like a living metaphor. Water, in mystical traditions, is the substance of emotion, intuition, and the subconscious. To walk on it is to transcend the pull of reactive emotion, to master the self so thoroughly that one no longer sinks into fear, but rides the currents of reality with divine poise. Thoth, too, speaks of the waters of space, the fluidity of dimensions, the flowing matrix of time. Water, in both teachings, is not passive. It is alive, responsive, and coded with memory. To master the waters is to command the currents of manifestation. Even the act of healing is layered with symbol. Jesus heals with a word, a touch, a gaze. He restores not only bodies, but identities. Your faith has made you whole, he says, not I, but your faith. The healing is not imposed, it is activated. It is a remembrance of the original pattern, the divine blueprint that illness had obscured. This matches perfectly with the tablet's teachings, that all disease is distortion, and all healing is resonance. When one is attuned to the frequency of truth, the illusion of separation, and thus of dis-ease, dissolves. Perhaps the most powerful allegory shared across both paths is the descent and ascent motif. Jesus descends into the tomb and rises transformed. Thoth speaks of descending into the halls of Amenti, underworld of hidden wisdom, only to return bearing greater light. This is not about physical travel, but interior journeying. It is the spiral descent into the unconscious, the realm of forgotten archetypes and buried traumas, followed by the ascent into full spectrum awareness. In both traditions, resurrection is not a miracle. It is the natural result of moving through the full cycle of inner alchemy. The kingdom of heaven, that ever-elusive realm Jesus so often invoked, is not distant. It is layered into this world like a holographic overlay. It is within you, he said, and this is the crux of all mystical paths. The tablets whisper the same, that other realms exist not out there, but within higher states of consciousness, accessible only through inner work. The kingdom, the flame, the word, they are not separate concepts, but facets of the same crystal. Jesus and Thoth are not rivals across time, but reflections in the same mirror, each speaking from a different angle of eternity. What emerges from these symbolic narratives is not merely awe, it is a map, a compass forged in myth, guiding us not to follow, but to remember, to reclaim the sacred geometry embedded within our own lives, to see in every trial a crucifixion, in every act of courage a resurrection, and in every quiet moment a flame awaiting breath. The highest truths, no matter how exalted, mean little if they cannot be lived. If the light spoken of by Jesus and Thoth cannot pierce the noise of traffic, the ache of loneliness, the hum of anxiety in the middle of an ordinary Tuesday, then it remains an abstraction, a myth locked away in golden vaults. Yet this is the very point where the hidden teachings become not only mystical, but revolutionary. They are not reserved for mountaintops or temples. They are meant to be activated in the grocery store, the family dinner, the inner battle at 2 a.m. when doubt comes dressed as reason. These teachings, when truly integrated, do not elevate us above the world. They awaken us within it. Take, for instance, the principle of light as essence. If you are light, not metaphorically but fundamentally, then your presence itself is a force. You don't need to preach, correct, or convince. You simply need to walk in alignment, to speak with the resonance of integrity, to act as if every choice is a thread woven into the architecture of the cosmos. When Jesus said, "Let your light so shine before men," he wasn't asking for performance. He was revealing a metaphysical law, that aligned presence transforms space. The emerald tablets echo this with crystalline clarity. Radiate light, and it will dispel darkness. That's not poetry, it's physics of the soul. Integration means seeing the ego not as an enemy to be destroyed, but as a tool to be sanctified. In your daily interactions, notice the subtle pulls of identity. The desire to be right, to be seen, to be superior, to be pitied. These micro-movements are the whispers of the adversary in the desert, tempting you to define yourself by form rather than essence. But now you are aware. Now you remember. You breathe, pause, observe, and choose differently. This is spiritual warfare not with others, but within. This is crucifixion in real time, the death of the lower self in service to the resurrection of the true. Thoth speaks of guarding the flame within. That flame is your awareness, your conscious presence. It must be tended like a sacred hearth. How do you do this practically? You stop outsourcing your power. You speak when it serves truth and remain silent when it does not. You align with what is life-giving, not what is trend-following. You begin to live as though you were not a random cluster of neurons, but a divine frequency choosing to wear flesh. Jesus called it abiding in the Father. Thoth described it as becoming one with the eternal flame. Both mean the same thing, to live from the center. Forgiveness, too, becomes less about moral virtue and more about energetic liberation. Jesus forgave even on the cross, not to prove sainthood, but because clinging to grievance shackles the soul to illusion. The emerald tablets teach that the initiate must transmute lower energies into light. And what is resentment but energy held in distortion? In practice, this means no longer feeding the loop. It means choosing peace over punishment, not because the other is innocent, but because you are, and your frequency must no longer be weighed down by what no longer serves. Even the body becomes sacred ground for integration. Jesus healed through touch because the body is not secondary. It is the temple, the vessel through which divine light is conducted. Thoth taught that the physical form is but a manifestation of thought, and that its mastery leads to immortality, not the kind found in myths, but the kind known as vibrational sovereignty. This doesn't mean denial of the body. It means alignment with its deeper intelligence. It means listening, moving with grace, feeding it in a way that honors its origin, treating the skin not as a boundary but as a bridge. Work becomes worship when the teachings are integrated. Whether you are writing code, raising children, tending plants, or managing accounts, it is not the action that matters, it is the awareness behind it. Thoth called this acting always from the flame. Jesus said, "Do all things unto the Father." In practical terms, this means presence, integrity, creating as though the divine were your only client. Even conflict, when approached through this lens, becomes alchemy. You stop reacting from the wound and begin responding from the center. You realize that every argument is a disguised invitation to higher awareness. Time, too, begins to lose its tyranny. The emerald tablets dissolve the illusion of time as linear, encouraging the initiate to live in spiral rhythms, cycles of growth, rest, decay, and rebirth. Jesus, likewise, placed little emphasis on the hour or the day, focusing instead on readiness. Be awake, for you know not the hour. In daily life, this means living less from urgency and more from alignment. You begin to notice when something is ripe, when a conversation should unfold, or when silence should hold space. You stop chasing schedules like a slave and start following energy like a master. And love, love. Not the sentimental echo, but the radical force. Jesus embodied it, not as emotional comfort, but as cosmic fire, touching lepers, confronting hypocrisy, weeping with the grieving, washing the feet pads of betrayers. The emerald tablets match this with their insistence on unity. All is one. When this love is integrated, it ceases to be a feeling and becomes a field you walk in. It doesn't mean weakness or passivity. It means living with such clarity and compassion that even your boundaries are acts of grace. It means recognizing the divine spark even in the ones who forgot their own light. This is where the teachings are no longer distant stars, but the gravity guiding your every step. You become the parable, the flame, the seed, the resurrection. Not in theory, but in posture, in tone, in how you carry your pain, how you uplift others, how you refuse to live in forgetfulness. Jesus and Thoth did not come to be worshipped. They came to show the way, and the way is not above you or ahead of you. It is already inside you, dormant only until chosen. Integration is the quiet revolution, not a flash of enlightenment, but 1,000 sacred choices made in secret. It is not about escaping the world, it is about redeeming it moment by moment, act by act, frequency by frequency. When you embody the teachings, you do not become someone new. You remember who you've always been. We have walked through mirrors. We have sat at the feet of two ancient voices, Jesus, the Galilean flame who spoke in riddles of heaven, and Thoth, the Atlantean scribe who carved the secrets of light into emerald stone. They did not live in the same age nor speak the same tongue, but their teachings spiral around one another like twin serpents ascending a single spine. Their wisdoms were never meant to compete. They are two chords of the same cosmic music, vibrating through time, waiting for the one who has ears to hear. And now, as this journey nears its threshold, a question rises. What will you do with what you've remembered? You see, this exploration was never just academic. It was never about theological comparison or mystical aesthetics. It was about reactivating the map already encoded within you. You are the scroll, you are the temple, you are the buried flame that both Jesus and Thoth pointed toward again and again, not as an abstract ideal, but as the living possibility of your awakened self. This realization changes everything. It changes how you wake up in the morning, not with dread or repetition, but with sacred responsibility. Each breath becomes a prayer, each step an offering. You begin to move through life not as a psyker desperate for answers, but as a living embodiment of the question itself. You no longer ask, "What is the truth?" You ask, "How deeply can I live it?" For Jesus' transformation was never passive. Take up your cross, he said. Not carry a burden, but willingly enter the crucible, willingly dissolve what is false to awaken what is real. For Thoth, the journey was one of mastery, of aligning thought, word, and will with cosmic order. Both paths are the same river, to shed illusion and radiate light. Not in some future paradise, but here, now, with trembling hands and tired eyes, and a heart that refuses to close. This is what the Emerald Tablets called becoming more than man. This is what Jesus meant when he said, "You are the light of the world." It is not flattery. It is a directive, a mirror, a flame passed from hand to hand since the first soul remembered who it was. Do you see it now? You are not merely studying teachings. You are becoming them. You are not just learning symbols. You are the living glyph through which Spirit expresses. Your life, when aligned, becomes scripture written not in ink, but in presence. Every time you forgive instead of judge, every time you speak truth instead of shrink, every time you love without demand, you are vibrating in the frequency of Christ and Thoth, of heaven and earth, of flame and stone. You become the convergence point. You become the bridge. And this is the call. Not to escape the world, but to transfigure it by being fully in it, while remembering that you are not of it. To look into the eyes of others and see not their masks, not their wounds, but the same light that animates you. To walk through darkness not in fear, but as one who carries a torch that cannot be extinguished. To let death itself become a teacher, a threshold, not an end. To become a vessel for the sacred, not in some perfect future, but in the fierce imperfection of now. You are the alchemist. You are the initiate. The time for waiting is over. Let the tablets no longer be a mystery buried beneath time. Let the parables no longer be riddles bound to a forgotten Sunday. Let them rise within you, alive, breathing, incarnate. Walk as light in a world that has forgotten it. Speak as one who has touched the flame. Live as one who knows the kingdom is not coming. It is here, if only you choose to see. This is not the end of a journey. It is the beginning of everything.